Hello, and welcome to the Stacking Dingers Show, your home for all things Underdog Major League Baseball. You can visit our Substack at stackingdingers.com. Get this show, rankings, and any written work that we actually get to. I am Matthew, aka Sheep, aka Dark Sheep. You can find me on Twitter at D4RKSH33P underscore. And you can catch my draft streams on Friday nights at the Sheep Seats here on YouTube also. Joining tonight is Chris, the Sheet Master. You can find him only on Twitter right now, I think, at B3isball, as Brendan likes to say, B3ISBOL. And also we have the head of MLB info for Underdog, Brendan Tuma here. You can find him on Twitter at TooMuchTuma. You can find his Substack at brendantuma.substack.com. And most importantly, you can find now his written work at Baseball America. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really cool to do and release some more stuff coming up in the future. I grew up reading Baseball America because my dad got it and we would go through together. So it was really cool moment to publish that.
Yeah, we make us look unprofessional here with your professional creds. No, but that's awesome. Before we begin our pitcher episode, we do have to take a moment of silence today for Kyle Bradish's elbow. So, no, I'm kidding. But we were talking before we started. This would have been a lot different show. Brendan had a whole half an hour prepared on why Kyle Bradish was the best value on the board tonight. So it might be shorter than we had planned.
It's different than people who are drafting in the public dinger contest. But in the employee contest that we're able to do at Underdog, like I'm it's like 75% Bradish. And I took him in a dynasty startup this offseason, and I traded Mike Trout for him in another dynasty league as part of another deal. And I was very aggressive on Bradish this offseason. So it's just like cruel and ironic that this is like the first big injury news of spring training, but like we were also talking about off air, like there's going to be others, like the player pool will get shaken up at least a couple more times before first pitch.
So I was ready to come in and declare my 1% Bradish a terrible misstep that needed to be corrected. But instead, 1% is actually overweight at the moment. And so I am going to spend the rest of my drafting season here correcting that and bringing it as close to zero as I possibly can.
I will say, I do think, the most likely outcome is probably, definite doesn't pitch, all that much in 2024. And it might even be TJ, which, just cancels him out for the year, but he's supposed to start like throwing tomorrow. He already got the PRP ejection. Like this has already happened. That's like the one upside about it all is we're kind of gonna find out quickly if he's able to at least throw. And I mean, if by mid-March he's on a throwing program and he's projected to be out or projected to start his season in like early May or something, like it's just something to keep in mind. But I mean, it would need to be like a last round pick sort of thing. And you don't want to make that bet even until as late as possible into draft season.
Yeah. So, all right, moving along here. We have the sheet up, Chris's sheet. We have selected the pitcher tab, which he has thankfully made for these episodes. As we, if you did not check out the previous episode, we did run down Nez and friend of the show, Easy. We ran down as many infielders as we could in 2 hours, and I think like every couple hours, I think of another infielder we probably could have talked about in that show. But definitely go check that out. But tonight we're talking pitchers. So as you can see on the sheet here, we have all of the pitchers. We have them sorted by ADP, and included on the sheet is the bat projections as well as the ATC projections. So sort of this center column is the rank based on total points. projected by the different systems, and then over here we have the actual the points projected. So you have the points projected. The two important columns here are the points projected overall for the season and the points projected per appearance or start in this case for most of these guys that we'll be talking about. So this kind of gives you that balance of how much they are likely to pitch over the course of the season, and then how much they're going to score on a rate basis. So we'll just sort of quickly go here through these top couple of guys. I don't think anybody really has too much argument about Spencer Strider being the first pitcher off the board. This really isn't an episode about when you should be taking pitcher. Then the strategies behind it, we're just sort of talking through them and the positives and minuses of certain guys. Does anybody? I don't think anybody objects to Strider. And then Cole, Burns, Gossman. As you can see, Burns kind of is not projected quite as highly in the bat. But do you guys have any much to say about any of these guys?
Chris, you kick us off with your boy.
So Strider he's the guy. He's P1. He's like, I'm very comfortable taking him where he goes. I think that we've done, when and how many pitchers to take a million different ways. And we're still doing them in many forms. Billy had some good stuff about that, over the last couple weeks. But I think he is specifically Strider, a very deserving first pitcher off the board overall. And I think his skill set is perfectly tailored towards the underdog scoring format, where he is just going to rack up strikeouts. And if he hurts you, it's in ways like whip, which aren't really like a direct hit on your score in underdog. I think that we are very good at discussing hitters that are like good for the format and bad for the format. Like, it's kind of easy to say like, okay, here's all the power guys with patience. Like, those are the ones that pop relative to, your standard 5x5 roto or other common formats. We don't do it as much with pitchers. And I think Strider's a guy that can change the game over the course of the season, but specifically on like a week or a 2-week stint or a 4-week stint for the playoffs. He has that like monstrous upside every time he touches the ball. And I think, sky's the limit. I've taken a bunch. I'll continue to take a bunch. And that's pretty much my Strider take. And I don't really see myself changing it up too much after that.
Yeah. I'll just keep it with Strider here to compare him to the other guys. Like, I would rather take Strider where he goes than like Burns or Gossman where they go, even though like I'm looking at these live ADPs, like that's like pretty late for the third, fourth pitchers off the board, I think, especially compared to last year. And I'd be curious to know if it's how much that's moving up or down. But if all these guys have their best season, Strider's ceiling is just the highest. And if you want to buy into the idea that this year, pitching just isn't going to be as good again, and it's going to be more globby, even at the top, who could separate from the pack in that way. And it's really Strider. I pulled it up just to confirm that I had it right. But since like the pitch tracking era began in 2002, Strider last year had the highest swinging strike rate of all time. And it was like 2% higher than 2019 Garrett Cole, that's like a big difference at the top from number 1 to number 2 over a 20-year span. So like, last year, was he getting unlucky with the ERA? Is that why it was so bloated, or is it because he's a 2-pitch pitcher? Like that's still kind of a little bit of a question, but he's still so young and we don't know for certain. And the upside is so high that it's an okay bet to make. Like, he is the one who could just, blow everyone else out of the water. Whereas as we get, a little bit down the list to Burns, to Gossman, to Castillo, some of these guys, like they could all be really good and might be the guy you need in a certain week or two. But they don't have just that same separation upside.
Yeah, and you just have to look at this point per appearance to see how much more he projects than everybody else to understand it, even if you aren't familiar with baseball and maybe some of the differences between these guys. Garrett Cole, we saw a reduced strikeout rate last year, still just cruised along to the Cy Young. Brendan, do you have any thoughts on that, or are you just comfortable with the workhorse that he is?
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I made this case about Strider, someone who's going to separate. But like last year, Cole was like he separated, and it wasn't even his best season. It's just he's become what the way I viewed Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer 4 years ago. Like he's a Hall of Fame pitcher. He's older, but that's kind of good in a way because it means he's built up to this workload. He can handle it. I think part of the strikeout rate coming down was a little bit pre-planned because it came with such an increase in his cutter usage. He's willing to pitch to contact a little more. And then the last thing with him, which this is true of all the guys in the top, but I think it's something I'm going to mention the further we get down ADP. But like you said, Chris, like we don't always talk about who does well in this format, but wins is something that I've really been paying attention to when drafting pitchers this offseason. And obviously for the Yankees, that's not going to be an issue.
Well, we hope, obviously. We didn't see that last year. The question about Burns, Chris, is I think a lot of people are wondering, is going to Baltimore better or worse for him than being in Milwaukee? Do you have any thought on that?
I think better. I think, park-wise, like that god-awful thing they added in left field last year is a pro for him. And I think that Tuma hit on the big point. I think that the team is just better in Baltimore than it was in Milwaukee. And I think in a walk year, he could just go out and be awesome. The price feels every day I switch. Some days it's like, no thanks. I'd rather take these like outfielders in this range. Some days it's like, okay, like this is a guy we've taken way higher in the past. Situation has probably improved. He put together an incredible back half of last year. Like why now are we letting him slide? Are we just thinking about the guys that went in this range last year and how some of them kind of flamed out and tying him to that archetype? And then there's some days where it's like, why isn't he, going 10 picks earlier? Like, why isn't he next to Cole in that like back half of the second round range? I swing between those. And since the trade, I've been leaning much more towards we're either right or we're a little bit low on Burns. I think he's near the bottom of his like price at the moment. And if I had to prognosticate his ADP going forward for the next 6 weeks, I think he's going to start trending upwards and be like a 2-3 turn guy by the time we get to opening day. I think that's where we're headed with Burns.
Okay. Kevin Gossman sort of had a career year last year. And just, he projects for, the same amount of starts, but, both ATC and BAT have him, just slightly above in overall points. Or I guess at least points per. Yeah. And I don't have too much to say about him. Anybody have any Gossman takes?
I feel like this range, Gossman through like Gallen. I mean, it goes down a little more even like really through Nola, but kind of Gossman through Lopez also. But like that range, like these are just like really steady, veteran SPs who have trusted workloads. I would say the one who stands out, especially just his individual placement, is Yamamoto. Not just by the projection. I mean, I think this is something like it was pretty obvious. Like he wasn't in the bullpen. So when he came into the dinger, it was like kind of obvious, like, okay, he's going to rise in ADP quickly because everyone's going to want to draft him. Same idea with like some of the top prospects and that sort of thing. So, but this is definitely like too rich. Not just where he's going as a pitcher, but even like going above Castillo, Wheeler, Lopez. Like, I don't agree with that. I think and again, this isn't even like necessarily the projection. I think the Dodgers they haven't straight up said they're doing a 6-man rotation, but they're kind of subtly implying it, and it makes sense just when you look at who's on that staff. And I think that's led me, even my, crush Bobby Miller, to not going crazy overboard with him, because with the weekly scoring, I just think that's going to decrease their chances at a 2-start week. And like Yamamoto could be great for 1 start a week, but you know, someone drafted much later could just have 2 starts with good matchups and beat him on a week. And you could say that for anyone kind of, but I just, the Dodgers aspect of it, it's good because of the wins, but it's bad because of the projected inning total, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even Dave Roberts yesterday in an interview I saw did even say, no, we're not doing a 6-man rotation. We're just gonna, this is a question that comes up a lot on streams and in chats that I see. Are the Dodgers doing a 6-man rotation? The best way that I've tried to describe it is they're doing a 5.5-man rotation.
I like that.
Like they're gonna have their guys going 5 when it makes sense, but they're also going to build in as much rest as possible without doing a always 6-man rotation.
This is going to be like, this is not just like, oh, like the Dodgers got to get through this year using a 6-man. Like next year, if Otani's assuming he's pitching again in the rotation, like he's used to going on a 6-man rotation. Obviously, Yamamoto is as well. The Dodgers in their position as an organization, like they don't need to stretch these guys out for the regular season. Their goal is to get to the playoffs with all of them healthy, including Glass now, including, obviously Kershaw when he comes back. Bobby Miller's a young guy. Emmett Sheehan's a young guy. Paxton's had injury issues. Like they're so incentivized to not push these guys, and that's going to be great for them. But I do think that's going to hurt a little bit for fantasy. They'll still be all efficient. I think it's just the workload question that has me a little hesitant at this price.
Yeah, and just maybe for someone who doesn't realize, for Yamamoto, the way that pitchers are handled in Japan, that they do only pitch once per week. Like there's never an option of, the schedule's never set up so that you would pitch twice in a week. So that's why we're saying when he comes over here, it's important for him to, as part of his adjustment, is usually the teams try to keep them on that sort of once per week start. And then, like you said, with the Dodgers, it becomes even more important with all the other pieces that they have put together. I mean, you didn't even mention Walker Buehler in that list. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, they needed another good pitcher there. Forgot about him.
And they have enough guys sitting at AAA that could come just do a start, no problem, like too. So it's like they can do it. So why not?
Feels like this is a thing we're going to talk about with every Dodgers pitcher as we go down the list, and they're all talented. They're all probably not going to be like the max inning guys. So I don't really love the idea of shelling out for the most expensive one at this point in the draft, especially like just considering what's available at other positions in that range too. Like I do, if I'm not taking one of the other guys that go right behind him, I'm probably taking a Lindor, a Springer, somebody like in that tier of hitter, as opposed to Yamamoto. I think this feels like the opposite of Burns. This feels like the peak value of where he's going to be.
I would take Castillo, Wheeler, Lopez easily straight up over him. There's another further down the list I would take straight up over him. And most times I would probably take, Gallon, Framber, maybe Nola. So yeah, it's just a little too high, especially with all the concerns we laid out.
Yeah. So I in my mind have Castillo and Wheeler as basically the same pitcher. Not like style wise, but just like when I want them, like in a lineup to head up a lineup, I think of them in the same sort of category. Pablo Lopez has a little more recent injury history, so that's why I just don't include him exactly with those two. But if I can start like an anchor pitcher build with Castillo or Wheeler, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. Nothing. Again, they're going to get you your quality starts, your wins. Yeah, they're studs.
Yeah. Love both of them. Love this range. This is, I think, like the start of the kind of better value tier for pitching, and kind of continues into the next stretch of guys. But those two are, I almost consider them a tier ahead of Lopez, Gallen, and the rest of these guys. I think Castillo and Wheeler are like solidly in Gausman range for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm also comfortable taking Pablo Lopez. We just saw such a great season last year, and he really just stepped up. And like, I'm not super worried about the injury stuff, but just like there's that like slight dock on him compared to the other two. And I mean, Gallen is fine. I don't love him quite as much. I don't know why that is. um, maybe it's the team. I don't know. Maybe he's not as exciting. You know, you see the points per. You know, he's a little bit more exaggerated on the bat, but you know, it's just a little bit less.
One just thing I'll note about him, if you're the type of person who doesn't like pitchers who go deep into playoffs, like he added a ton of volume in the playoffs this year. He led all of baseball in innings when you factor in the playoffs. So it's like 243 and 2/3. That's just like a big number. So that
Yeah.
would be, I guess, the only thing if that's something that bothers someone.
So actually, that makes me kind of want to do a little bit of a diversion. Now that you mention that, you know, you wrote an article that I keep sharing, pitchers as balloons, and talking about innings. So you want to just like do a brief rundown of what you were saying in that article?
For sure, yeah. You guys both have football minds as well, and so I think you'll relate to this. But that's where the idea came from. Like Jacob Sanderson, who's a fantasy football writer, who's got a Substack called Thinking About Thinking that I subscribe to, and he wrote it in the summer talking about running backs as balloons and how to get that every down bell cow. Running back needs to show that they can handle the workload and that they can remain efficient with that bigger workload, and that's what we're seeking. And everyone else are just like ancillary pieces. And I read it and I was like, holy crap, like this is exactly how I think of starting pitchers. So on my Substack, I did write a piece called Starting Pitchers Are Balloon. That wasn't like a normal piece for me. Normally I'm like player analysis driven and very data driven, but this was a little just bit of game theory, something that I've really been thinking about lately, across all fantasy leagues, redraft, dynasty, underdog. When I'm betting on the Cy Young, like who's someone who can handle a big workload, who will have the requisite innings. Cause I think it's really easy, especially in this era of, Twitter and GIFs. And we have all these pitching gurus who are telling us how good these guys are on a per pitch, basis with something like Steph Plus. And it's tempting. Let me just get all these fun young upside guys, because it's not about that you can't take, the young guy who isn't built up yet. Like I'll use Bobby Miller as an example. Like he's just like hasn't shown the same workload year over year that like a Luis Castillo has, for instance. So it's not that you can't take Bobby Miller ever, or take someone like, I mean, there's like much smaller balloons. Like Shane Baz gets drafted all the time, and that's just someone who has like no track record of holding up over, like Michael King, makes me nervous. Like Chris Sale, some of these guys. And anyway, so the main point is you just don't want to have a rotation like full of those guys. You kind of want to get your anchor balloons early. And that's exactly what, Gausman, Castillo, Wheeler, like that's what those guys have shown year over year.
Yeah, and I guess when you were talking about Gallen and his innings, it's sort of like maybe his balloon got a little bit blown up too much, and it might be a little bit weaker this year that we could see a pop.
Yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse with that. I think for the most part, for these guys who have shown the workload year after year, it's a good thing to be built up this way. But in Gallen's case, yeah, I know that like the playoff stuff, it's high pressure innings, shorter off season, that type of thing.
Right.
So the Cy Young betting talk sparked a thought in my mind that we're producing on the fly here, but someone in the audience write this down and remind us before the season starts. I want a stacking futures episode,
That's
where we
really
don't
good.
talk about Underdog and we just go through the markets, because right now you can get Luis Castillo AL Cy Young parlayed with Zach Wheeler NL Cy Young for 107 to 1. So I think
What?
my bankroll strategy just changed. I'm actually not entering the dinger. We're putting it all on that. And I'll talk to you guys in November or December, whenever they announce these awards, and we'll all celebrate. I think that's the way to play this whole season.
That's a really good idea for a show.
Yeah, that is. All right. Framber Valdez, like, is he the ace now in Houston?
Like, yes, I guess. That kind of just sums up how I feel about Framber. He's there. He's totally fine, like as my first pitcher in a build. Not reaching for him, usually catching him when he falls. But I like pitchers in that range. He's like I don't know. He kind of feels like he's going to be there for you guy, putting up innings, putting in starts. Like, I don't have the kind of issues with maybe durability or other things that maybe some of these other guys do. He feels very safe to me, which is a little bit concerning. But as the 12th or 13th ish guy drafted here, on a good team, going to win a lot of games, pitches deep into games, which is one thing that you do get rewarded for with quality starts, being a whole 5 points. And that's one stat that we do see is declining. Like, guys just don't get the leash to go deep into games to meet the criteria for a quality start as much anymore. And Framber's a guy that can do that and provide value to your team in that way. So fine with him would be my short way of saying a lot of stuff.
He's someone who I want to say like 2 years ago, like when Underdog Contest came out and the scoring system was released, like I don't think a lot of people realized the quality start aspect of it. And Framber's kind of the poster boy for like quality starts mattering in fantasy because like it's his best category, which is just kind of unique for a pitcher. Um, but it feels, it's been 2 years since then. Like everyone's caught on. He has that moniker of like he's the QS guy, and so he's therefore appropriately valued. I feel like he's someone who, if he was going 5-6 spots in the pitcher ranks later, like he would be like a big target, but he just feels like fairly valued.
So we did see kind of a stretch of last season where he had some pretty bad results. Are you worried about that at all, Brendan, continuing?
I'm a little worried about that happened with every Houston starter. It seemed like Hunter Brown faded in the second half, Christian Javier, and they talked about fatigue for these guys. Like Framber had a couple starts where he was like visibly frustrated on the mound. So I don't know what's going on with that. I mean, like Dusty Baker is someone who has just let his pitchers go. Like this isn't the Rays where they're taking him out at 80 pitches despite amazing results. Like they just Dusty would let them fight through, tough fifth innings, tough sixth innings, like that sort of thing. So I don't know. If with veterans like that, I try not to get too caught up in, partial season statistics and just let the body of the work speak for itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned being frustrated. That was part of what brought on his breakout was getting some of the like psychological side of baseball down.
Yeah, he's talked about that. That's a good point.
Talked about that, and like just like going out there and smiling was part of what made him better. Like, and when he's not smiling, he can tell that he's pitching worse. So it's an interesting random note. Aaron Nola, back with Philly. Again, he's same thing with Framber. Like, I guess he's fine here. I think I like Framber better, or I like going someone a little bit later. I'm not getting a lot of Nola this year. Maybe I got burned too much last year. But he did have sort of a change at the end of the season that he started improving, based on like there's some stuff where he was looking at the pitch clock, and we talked about when we talked to Cardi, we were talking about the pitch clock change, and like for a while there, Philadelphia had the wrong time on the pitch clock. So any concern with Nola? Are you happy taking him here?
I feel like yeah, my one line is I feel like it should be a bigger discount after last year, but again, he just feels fair.
Yep. All right.
I feel like no matter which way the season goes, we write the narrative one or two ways. It's if it goes bad, it's okay, the signs were there. He just got paid and he just got unlucky with homers like he always does and just kind of bottomed out. And if it goes well, it's like, wow, last year was maybe a bit of a down year. Guy had the talent, bounced back. So like there's very much two paths you can pick. And I think he's all kind of like Framber, just fine in this range. I kind of feel the same way about a couple guys in here where it's like, it's fine. I don't really feel too strongly about most of them one way or another, except for a couple. But Nola is part of the fine bucket for me.
Yeah. So next guy here, Kodai Senga. There is a pretty big discrepancy here between the bat and ATC. It doesn't show quite up in the numbers because but if you look over here, ATC is almost, like a point higher per start. I don't have too much to say about Senga, so I'll leave that open to anybody.
I actually do feel strongly about this one. I do not like it almost basically as much as I don't like the Yamamoto price. And the reason is that Senga's control. Sorry, I was just pulling up his advanced stats that I have here. So Jeff Zimmerman of Fangraphs has done a little bit of writing about ball percentage, which is just like literally how often they throw balls compared to strikes. And it's just one step deeper than looking at like walk rate. And Senga's walk rate isn't good either, but he's only had 1 year in the majors, and you might say like, oh, he could improve that control, and maybe he can because that is something that pitchers do, but it's not going to happen just naturally because his ball percent is really low. And my kind of theory is like these are the type guys who struggle with command who can oscillate year to year. Like Blake Snell is an example who has a really high ball rate, and we've seen how volatile he is. Dylan Cease is another who has a really high ball rate, and some years they overcome it and they have a really shiny ERA, and then other years they don't. And my theory about why Senga's ADP is this high still is because he just hasn't burned us yet the way a Snell or Cease has, because he was really good last year. So this is one I definitely don't like, and it's a big part of it has to do with who's coming up after him, but it's also just on its own. Like I would have him, in personal ranks like 5 to 10 spots lower among starting pitchers, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll open the next one up for you, Chris, because I know you're the high man on Glass Now. So take away the Glass Now.
So let's start with the downside. The downside is two things. Injury downside, he's got a history of kind of being plagued by a mix of minor and major injuries, which is not a good track record of kind of injury history and whatnot. The other one is what we talked about earlier with Yamamoto. There is just a structural downside to the Dodgers pitchers this year, where over the course of the season and on a week-to-week basis, you're probably not getting max value volume wise. So what does that mean? That means you need them to be mega efficient while they put up their less volume innings pitched, batters faced, all of that. And that I think is where Glasnow can shine. He has proven above everything else that when he does pitch and is healthy, he is awesome. And like Strider, you just don't look at any of the numbers, just look at the colors on the page. The two guys that pop out in that points per plate appearance column for the bat, it's Strider real high, Yamamoto real low, and then the next one that pops on the page is Glasnow. Like he is just a machine in this scoring format when you get him in the right week, in the right situation. So at this spot, in this range, I love actually. I have a lot of Glasnow, and I will probably keep picking him up as he keeps sliding down the board a little bit. Going for guys that the Rays trade away is a way to go bankrupt real easy. So I don't like that part. And if it was a dumb team picking him up, I'd be terrified. But it's the Dodgers. So I do have a very high level of respect for their brain trust, and I feel like they have a plan, and they're going to try to work through this. So at this point, like 20, he's doing 20 picks after Yamamoto. He's projected to be more efficient, probably less innings, but like I'll take the shot on the more efficient, more proven major league producer at that spot any day of the week.
Perfect. And then we'll bounce to the next name because I know you already kind of alluded to him earlier, Brendan. George Kirby, where is he on your rankings?
So I would probably have him 8th. I think like right after Pablo Lopez, and I've been doing a lot of builds where it's pretty aggressive hitter early, especially outfield, and to the point where like George Kirby is my first starting pitcher on a lot of teams, and he's the first one where when I look at it, I say I just cannot pass on his value. Like this price just makes no sense. I didn't get around to doing it, but something I wanted to do is for certain positions just compare the NFBC ADP to Underdog ADP. Like NFBC is not necessarily correct, but it's just like a high stakes fantasy site that's got a lot. People put a lot of money on it in those leagues, so there's some reason to at least look at it. And that's my guess is among these early pitchers, like Kirby would have one of the biggest gaps in where he goes there and where he goes on Underdog. And part of the reason for that is, Kirby's 5x5 projection is insane because his whip is projected to be so low because he does not walk players. I know he just did the whole ball rate thing with saying it, but Kirby had the best ball rate in the majors last year. And in the second half, he had a higher strikeout rate. And, you might just hand wave that away and say that's a little bit of noise, but he started throwing a splitter. The Mariners are known to be pretty good with pitching development. And if, he is going to compare his stellar command that he's known for with a higher strikeout rate, like he is built up as a balloon, even though he's young. So I trust the innings to be there. Because he walks so few guys, he can go deep in his starts. So he's going to get a bunch of quality starts. On top of all that, the home ballpark is just incredible for pitching. So he is kind of, to me, the one who this time next year, it wouldn't surprise me if we're drafting him as like the SP4 sort of thing.
Yeah, the key thing, like to have him compete, is to bring that strikeout rate up, which just doesn't. If you look in the past, doesn't show up quite as strongly as you would expect for someone that everybody's so high on.
Yeah, his floor feels so high, even without like the strikeout rate. And yeah, that's kind of like the upside case.
Yeah, and it's kind of the opposite floor of the next guy, Logan Webb, who's just like one of the few guys that we have left that just eats innings. So yeah, like as you can see, his per appearance is pretty low among this group, but the innings are super high for him. I'm comfortable taking Webb where he's going. Usually, if I want to do a strong pitcher build, like have him as a second one, I like that. He's slowly kind of falling, so I don't know where he goes to, but I'm fine taking him where he goes. So then we have the unsigned Blake Snell. Chris, where's he going to sign? Where would you like him to sign?
Let's
San
see.
Francisco.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one. I was gonna say Pittsburgh, just cause why not? Just throw him out there. I would love to go watch a Blake Snell start with Nez and just watch him tear his hair out every time he gets 2-0, 3-0, gets behind guys, throws a lot of balls, strikes a lot of guys out. Snell's such a weird one. Like he's just one of the more fascinating pitcher profiles we have, and he has these years that just kind of come almost out of nowhere where it's like, holy shit, like this is what happened. I remember seeing a tweet that I've been trying to find, but it was near the end of last year, and they were talking about how he's like notoriously wild, right? Like we just know that the command is not there, and it's very much like that is the con. But the way that the tweet was phrased and the stats they were showing was essentially that he is wild in the sense that he walks more guys than most people. That is for sure. But it's because he's hunting corners and he's hunting the edges of the plate. He's never giving in, and he's never missing over the middle of the plate. If he's missing, it's like in the dirt. It's a foot outside. It's an unhittable pitch. It's not a mistake down the middle that somebody can put in the stands. So that one kind of opened my eyes on what Snell's approach is, from like a pitching perspective. And I'm curious to see where he lands, because if he lands somewhere that's like San Fran would be a great one. I think that would be really fun. Um, he always has the depth in the game question, and maybe that wasn't just a Kevin Cash thing pulling him early. It seems like he's just kind of a guy that doesn't go deep in games all the time, but we can be fine for this because he's going to have his monster games and his monster weeks. So I'm warming to the idea, and he's also in that like glass now mold, high, like very high points per plate appearance guy. Like he scores in this format. So he's one that I'll probably be in on until we know his landing spot, and then we'll reassess at that point. But I think free agents are undervalued, and we usually don't have big ones like him at this point in the year. So I'll keep going on that for now.
Yeah, I think with the flaws where he's going, like I have no problem taking him just with the potential upside. And he was someone last year that was going even later because of those potential flaws. And I don't think people have taken the upside as much into account as they probably should have, even though he won the Cy Young. All right. Tariq Skubal, Brendan, we saw like he was one of the best in the second half last year in the season. Does he have the ability to take it through for a whole season? What we saw then?
He definitely has the ability. It's just to go back to the balloon analogy. Like he is not fully inflated. Like we don't know what exactly we're getting. You can dream on him on a per start basis being better than that, Castillo, Wheeler, Gallen tier. But I just trust those guys' workload so much more. And the Tigers, I know a lot of people think, they're going to take a step forward this year. Like their organization's definitely heading in the right direction, but it's a little bit different just with the wins there. If Skubal is kind of more of a 5 and 2/3 inning guy, that'll affect the QS. That matters. A lot's been made about the schedule he was facing last year. That's normally something I would hand wave away. When you go back and look at it, it was an insanely favorable schedule. That I think could be influenced, that did influence his ratios and that are influencing, therefore, his projections. So yeah, it's not my favorite bet to make at this price. I put it this way: like I would rather him prove it that he is that good, and then I would rather take him next year in the 4th round than this year, like where he's going. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yep. So the one that I think is probably more inflated than we expect due to recent changes of Corbin Burns leaving. I think Freddie Peralta really has the potential this year to be that 30 start guy. And just like, because I mean, the Brewers are going to need him. So I think he's got 2 years left on his deal. So they're just going to ride him, I feel like, this year. So I'm super happy with taking Freddie Peralta this year. You look over again, he is kind of standing out as the red. He's keeping up with the red in the per plate appearance. And I think we're just to keep the metaphor going, I think his balloon is just going to be the most inflated it has been. We have seen, him have some minor injuries, so there's still some risk there. And missing time, but if he's healthy, I think he can just smash this year. Dylan Cease, as you look here, Bat has him as the 6th ranked pitcher. But we're taking him as pick 72. Chris, what's up with that?
I really don't know. That number kind of popped when things got updated, and I don't like it. He's like the bad Blake Snell kind of archetype with better projections. I don't really know how that all works out, but his per plate appearance stuff I thought was going to be higher. He's actually kind of in this range. He's getting inflated as the like volume of innings pitched guy, which is interesting to me. That was not the bucket that I kind of had Cease being in. I hate clicking his name. It feels terrible, and I really don't like doing it, so I haven't done it much. Maybe I will as he gets cheaper. But like wild guy, bad team, maybe he gets traded, maybe not. Like the like rumors to a nice pitching friendly environment on a good team would be great. But I think the other side of the coin that we talked about earlier with these guys on great teams is guys on shitty teams. It's really hard to overcome like that just lack of quality talent around you. You're losing opportunities for wins. You're losing opportunities for quality starts. Defense has some measure of an impact on your runs. Shitty offense, yeah, we talked about the wins already. So like I don't like Cease. I think he's still too rich for my blood.
I will say that you do see him fall in an occasional room, and I grab him when that happens, just because he does have that kind of negative reputation of the wildness. So that's kind of when I'm getting him. But yeah, I'm also surprised that how his projection is high due to the innings. I would have also expected it higher in the per appearance. Um, so yeah, then Max Fried, he is sort of the opposite of Dylan Cease in that of what I was saying, that both projection system have him ranked quite a bit lower than where he is going in terms of pitcher ranks for the position. Brendan, where is that coming from?
I think it's that he had a. Oh, sorry for the actual projection. I was gonna say for drafters, I think it's that he had a forearm injury last year, which at the time, I remember it covering it. And it was just like, oh, is this going to be the end of Max Fried's season? He did make it back, and he was great. Then he had a hamstring injury. A hamstring injury, I'm not worried about, but it does just add to this perception that he missed a lot of time last. Well, not perception, this fact that he missed a lot of time last year. So if that hadn't happened, I mean, Max Fried, he would basically be Framber, this guy who's on a good team who goes deep into quality starts or goes deep into outings where he piles up these quality starts and then he gets the win. My guess is that when you look at Cease versus Fried and the season long projections from these systems, it's that volume of strikeouts. That doesn't matter to me as much on a per start basis because Max Fried can still have games where he gets the win, he gets the quality start, he gets 7 strikeouts. Those spikes are what we want. And yeah, I think when you just look at it as a season long basis, like the strikeouts that you can comfortably project for Cease make a big difference compared to someone like Max Fried.
All right. Jesus Luzardo is someone that I'm targeting. I was targeting a lot more earlier. I've kind of fallen off on it. I think it's more an overall strategy sort of thing for me, but I think Jesus Luzardo is going just like exactly where he should be, and I'm happy to take him here. Another guy that has some rumors getting moved. Any place that, or are you in on him, Chris, or would you rather him go somewhere else other than Miami?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is Santiago Espinal and a couple of pine tar sticks for Luzardo, and that's going to be finalized soon. So when he comes to Toronto, I think the ballpark's going to be a good fit, all that stuff. I like Luzardo. I would trade him for the pine tar sticks and Espinal. I would drive Espinal to the airport in that case, but I am dreaming. Nonetheless, I like him. I like this range. The next one, Luzardo, Grayson, Gilbert, Ryan, in. This is my favorite stretch of guys, and this is the section of the draft where I'm most overweight on pitchers. And I think he has rebounded so nicely from those like interesting end of his time in Oakland, where it was like, well, he had all this promise and like, what is going to become of him? And he's kind of settled into like, when you see pitcher 15 as his projection and where he's kind of at, that feels very right to me. That feels like where he's going, pricing in some reasonable floor that he's shown, and like he has upside. I think there's another level he can get to. So I like in this spot.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, this is an area that I'm also targeting. Not so much Joe Ryan, we can get to him, but next is Grayson Rodriguez, who, Brendan, you just did in your first Baseball America article, you did write him up. So I'll let you talk about him.
Yeah, I feel very in the know with Grayson Rodriguez of exactly what happened with his season last year. This was just a really high-end pitching prospect who had a literal transition to the majors when he had to figure out which of his pitches worked best, how often to throw them, how to prepare, his body for a season after a year where he missed some time in 2022. And he was a completely different pitcher in the second half, to the point where I feel like it's really gone unnoticed, because you look at Grayson Rodriguez's season-long numbers, they were fine for a rookie. But that first half was really bad. I mean, he got sent down, not to manage innings or anything, because the Orioles were trying to win a division and he legitimately wasn't helping them. So he got rid of his cutter that had some really bad results. He came back with some more velo because he figured out, the schedule of pitching in the big leagues and what you have to do in between starts and everything. And the results were just, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the results were tremendous, to the point where if I believe that he is a lot closer to that second half guy, because the results were backed up by things like Stuff Plus. Obviously, he's got great pedigree and a great track record. The Orioles, they're getting Felix Bautista out of nowhere, Yenier Cano out of nowhere. Kyle Bradish made a big jump. They're figuring it out with Grayson. Like, I'm kind of trusting whether it's the pitching development or the home park or the combination of both. Like, this is an organization that I feel confident in investing in this way. So, yeah, I think the only question you'd have with Grayson is innings, but similar to George Kirby, this is someone who I think we could be drafting, well inside the top 5 or 10 next year.
So I did not tell you this, but I pulled your graphic that you tweeted out
Nice.
today. The rookies of last year and their recent innings, and we see Grayson Rodriguez appear. He has that kind of shaky 21, 22 innings total due to some injuries, but then we saw just like this huge jump into the 165. Like you said, it was between the two. It was between AAA and the majors, but that doesn't really matter when we're looking at the total. And like that jump like makes me pretty confident that they're ready to unleash him this year to 180 or even 200 if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and the thing about 2022, which is obviously late, as you can see there, but that wasn't an arm injury or anything. So that makes me feel better. And yeah, I was surprised when I put this together, honestly. Like, he's more built up than I think. And he could go 180 next year, no problem.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely a big target of mine this year. He was a big target in the second half contest last year too, which worked out well. I think Logan Gilbert, in all of the shine of George Kirby, is getting lost. Just how consistent and good he has been, as well as the volume. I think like there's no reason to believe that he can't just like also outperform where he's going. Myself, I take him quite a bit.
He just strikes me as someone who I think is going to live, and I think he's maybe just on the inside of this, but he just strikes me as someone we're going to draft him as an SP2 for the next like 6 years type thing. Like, he's always going to tantalize with, oh, maybe he's an ace this year or whatnot, and there might be one year where he performs more as an SP3, but he's pretty sturdy. It's a good home park. The skills are there. Like, I really just, he's such a good SP2 pick for the next 5 years. I'm in for the next 5 years on him.
Yeah, excellent. And then Chris, you said Joe Ryan, who is next. You're in on him. We saw a strange year last year. He really struggled. We had some major home run problems for a period of time. So what is it that you're seeing that you're jumping back this year?
The range, like I like the price. I think this is a good floor for the caliber of pitcher that I think he is. I think he is just kind of he's very different, and I think that that's hard for some quantitative systems to like fully capture. And some of the new like stuff that we're getting about pitching and some of the detail that we now know that we've never known before, is able to help us quantify like why some of these guys are different. And he just has the most important pitch for most pitchers is what is your fastball? They throw most of the time, and he has a below average speed fastball that is incredibly effective, for reasons that we are starting to understand, but don't know for sure. He just finds ways to be successful, and has kind of like made his way up through the race system, through the twin system. And I feel like this is a valuable spot for him. I like that he's probably like I see 158 and 162 innings for his kind of innings projection, and that feels about right. And barring any injuries, maybe low. Like I feel like he's a guy that if he throws 180 innings, am I totally surprised? Maybe not. But I just like the price and I like the range, and I like him. He's effective. Like his points per plate appearance is also high, and I have a type, and I'm going to stick to my type. And one of these guys might be the guy you need. So I'm going to take shots, and I like Ryan where he goes.
All right, then we have Justin Steele, who maybe like if you had told me beginning of the season that we would be talking about potential Cy Young Justin Steele, I would have called you crazy. So what did he do last year, Brendan, that like made him suddenly on everybody's radar?
He's someone who I haven't even done, I did the Grayson article, so I felt like just very in the know with Grayson. Steele is someone who's very interesting, so I want to do that type of, absolute deep dive on. And I haven't yet. My understanding is that it's a unique cut fastball that not a lot of other people throw. And similar to kind of Joe Ryan, it doesn't fully make sense why he's able to perform so well, but he just does. And last year everything broke right for the Cubs for a really long stretch, and then he kind of fell apart the last few starts. And I think that just leaves a little bit of doubt in my mind where if this guy does get figured out, this is a pretty high price to pay. Similar to Scooble, like I would rather him prove it to me one more time, and then I'm willing to get in next year at an elevated cost, even if the price goes up.
Yeah, I'm mostly out on a similar idea. When it doesn't really make sense to me, just wait and see. Carlos Rodon is next. Yankees need him to bounce back this year. Is he injured? Is it health? Is he not good? I mean, what? I don't know. Anybody have any Rodon takes? Anybody
I mean,
interested
look at that red column. This is a Chris type.
This is a Chris guy, and that's why I keep drafting him. And then in July, when I'm like, oh my God, all my 7-pitcher teams have 3 guys left. Someone just play this clip back, and it's like, well, you moron, you only pick the guys that get hurt and then pitch okay when they're hurt or when they're not hurt. So yeah, I like Rodon. Where was he going? Like, was it last off season when he was going like in the 30s, and then like that 2-3, 3-4 range? Like this feels like a better landing spot for him, where I'm buying upside and the downside isn't nearly as bad. The guys he's like sandwiched around, like Steele versus Rodon feels like such a diametrically opposed comparison that whenever I see those two together, I just end up clicking Rodon. I will probably have to relax and stop as we go, because I need some of these other guys that I know I know you guys are bullish on a couple other names in here that I need to mix in, but I'm overweight on Rodon here to start with.
This range of steel kind of down through Yuri it's just really fascinating. And this is obviously impossible to do, but I would love to just be able to like ask the market, like, why is this the order of these guys? Because it's just like underdog drafters have shown a willingness for these top prospects to get really aggressive. And last year we saw Corbin Carroll rise. This year we're seeing Yamamoto rise. You know, the prices for Langford and Churio and Holiday, it's really aggressive. And then there's Yuri Perez, who as a 20-year-old was out of this world impressive, and is, you know, he's younger than Paul Skeens. Like he that like and we're taking him after, like, I love Mitch Keller, but we're taking him after Mitch Keller and Cole Reagans, and just stuff like that to me just it's really interesting to look at this range.
Yeah,
Is Yuri Perez is younger than Paul Skeens, our generation's Lamar is younger than Joe Burrow?
I mean, we'll get to Yuri Perez, but first we have Cole Reagans next. We saw him go to Kansas City, like find something that wasn't there before. We saw some of it, like he was working on some of it in the off season at Driveline, or is he at, I forget which one, but he sort of rebuilt his workout because he had spent so much time rehabbing from various injuries that they basically revamped all of his stretching and all that sort of body movement just to get him back to be able to throw off the mound. He had an increased velocity from that off-season work too. We saw some really great starts when he started in Kansas City, and we saw some of it fall off. This is a profile that scares me. I know I'm pretty alone on it. I don't see too many other people worried about Cole Reagans this year, based on how good he was when he was good last year. But for me, something about the profile of the increased velocity on a body that already had a lot of injuries just kind of scares me. I'm probably like way off here because of all the like physical stuff he changed. So I don't know. I'll let somebody do a more positive note on Cole Reagans rather than no. Brendan, you're kind of agreeing with me.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's in the Scooble Steel bucket of like, show it to me one more time and I'll be willing to take you at a higher price. I hate the situation for wins. And I think if we want like a half season question mark, can it hold up? Like Michael King goes a lot later and it just feels like a similar bet to me. So you summed it up perfectly. Everything that happened to him with the velocity boost, and yeah, I'm in lockstep with you.
Well, I guess we don't have Nez here tonight. He would be pounding the table, so we'll have to get that take on a different episode.
Oh, is he real? I would love to discuss that with him.
Yes, yeah. Bobby Miller is next. I had made a weird claim the other night that there's a chance that actually let's go back over. There's a chance that Bobby Miller is the guy who gets the most innings on the Dodgers staff this year. Just being kind of, I mean, he built up to 140. Like the most innings might mean 160, but to me, like it would make sense for them, like with all those older guys, like why not like ride Bobby Miller a little bit more than they have younger guys in the past. But obviously the Dodgers have managed young guys. They're quite known for how they restrict them. He did get, like I said, to the 140. Like if we see 160, I don't think he's projected for 160. Yeah, he's still projected for 140 or 150. So I think there is some room to grow there. I think, did you write up Bobby at some point during the off season, Brendan?
I did at the very beginning of the off season, and yeah, there's a ton of reasons to like him, from a prospect pedigree perspective, from what he showed as a rookie, if you're big into Stuff Plus, is his big claim to fame is that it's not just like, oh, his final Stuff Plus number is good. It's that he has, I want to say it was 5 pitches that are all above average by Stuff Plus, which that just gives him options both on a per start basis and on a year long basis to tweak that mix. And it's just such a high floor, and the Dodgers are going to get the most out of him. You can feel good about that. The only bad thing I can say about him, is the Dodgers aspect. Otherwise, he's like a similar Grayson bet to me, where it's I want to bet on the guy going into year 2.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm taking him for that year 2 boost. Zach Eflin, a year 2 in Tampa. Chris, again, if you would have told or if I had told you last year that Zach Eflin was going to be great, what would you say?
I would have said middle relief impact innings are an excellent way to use his skill set. But once again, the Rays no ball, maybe the best ball knowers around. And that was like one of those, like, should have pinged the radar. Like, okay, this is interesting. Like, what's going on here? They're not the type to just kind of shell out multi-year deals for guys.
It was like their biggest multi-year pitcher contract ever, right?
It might have been their biggest free agent signing ever, and it was like $40 million.
Something wild. But yeah, he was very effective last year as a starter. I think he was healthy, which helps. He plays for a smart team. I think he's totally fine at this spot. I like him as he probably has a higher floor than like maybe the Reagans, Bobby Miller, Yuri Perez, like Rodon for sure. Which is wild to say that Zach Eflin has like a high floor, but barring injury, I think he's shown us that he has the skills and the role and the team, the park, the whole system, like from the top down, to be a valuable pick. So I'm good. I like taking him here. He feels like a good click for me around 100.
Yeah. And next we have Kyle Bradish, who we started off with our moment of silence. He's pretty much undraftable for me right now. Maybe that's like you said, he's got the PRP injection. He's starting. He's supposed to throw like tomorrow or next week or whatever it is. But keep an eye on it.
He's going to get buried over the next month. And if the news is amazing by mid-March, then you can sprinkle in a few shares. But
yeah. So then we do have Mitch Keller. You did kind of say that you're pretty excited about Mitch Keller again this year, Brendan. So are you ready
I
to
like
get hurt
Mitch
again?
Keller. Nez was right about Mitch Keller last year. Like it was an incredible season, and like midway through the year, it was looking even better than it ended up being. It's funny, like the Pirates, sorry, but it's not going to be a lot of wins. He has shown, an ability to generate quality starts, even without getting those kind of, we often view them together, wins and quality starts. But like I feel pretty good about his ability to earn quality starts, and he had some incredible starts last year. I like Mitch Keller. He just, the wins thing just kind of like holds back his upside to me. But I like the way Chris said it. Like he feels like a fine click here, and that's how I describe him.
Yeah, and he does. If he did have some great games. He's got a pretty bad point per appearance projection. He is getting there on volume in the projections, but I think he has the ability to go out for certain outings and just put up a bunch of strikeouts. That he's a spike week type guy, even if he's not. He's got some bad ones sprinkled around it.
My main problem is I feel like he's too expensive for what he is. I think the cluster of guys that go like 20 or 30 picks later, like I'm looking at Bassett, Gray, Verlander, Montgomery, Berrios, Javier Darvish, like that range, that feels more like the guys that I want to be. Yeah, that feels like
it's
more
a good
like
way to phrase it.
Mitch Keller's mates than like the Rodon, Reagans, Miller, Eflin, rest in peace, Kyle Bradish, like Musgrove, Perez tier. Like those guys feel like he's the odd one out to me. So I'm gonna wait, and if he gets cheaper, I might take. But at this current price, he's a pass most of the time for me.
All right, so then Joe Musgrove, you know, he had a couple of different weird injuries kind of all come together. He had, you know, he dropped the weight on his foot, and then he had like bursitis in his elbow, and then some shoulder stuff. Um, I'm hoping that he's back because I think he could be a guy that, um, just based on his who he is and who he has been, I think he could be a guy we're drafting in a few rounds earlier than this next year. So at this point in the draft, I'm happy taking Musgrove here, just based on ignoring last season.
Yeah, I really like Joe Musgrove. He is someone we could look back on, mid-season and just be like, where was Joe Musgrove going? And look at some of these guys ahead of him and be like, what were we thinking? Like he is, a veteran pitcher who's been there, done that. It's a great park. There was freak injuries last year, and yeah, it feels like we're treating him like he's, this decrepitly older and injury prone, and that's just like not reality. So he should definitely move up.
Yeah, reminds me of like Gallon last year, like some of the injury stuff, and maybe I don't want him, but yeah. So yeah, Brennan, sell me on Yuri Perez. Like, is he going to get the innings to be relevant in this format?
He's definitely not going to, reach the innings upside of many of these other guys we've talked about. And it's like that just really affects your ceiling. Like I was just say you pulled it up before, and like he was coming off, below 80 the past 2 years, and then he only got up to 128. And so he's just not going to pitch 180 innings this year, like no matter what. Whereas that's, if Castillo, Wheeler, those type guys we've talked about stay healthy, like they will. So Yuri Perez, he just doesn't have the ceiling. And if they do shut him down late in the season, I know the contest is ending a little bit earlier this year, so that helps a bit. But if you're missing Yuri Perez late in the season because the Marlins are managing his workload, like that's going to hurt when it matters most. So I think you need to understand the bet you're making with all that in mind. That being said, again, I don't know why he's going this late. Like this is the type guy that, the market is usually, too aggressive on just because of the buzz and, wanting to hit on those high end outcomes. And I know for certain the workload is not going to be what, some other starting pitchers will have. And again, that's going to affect his ultimate ceiling. But on a per start basis, he's someone who I expect this time next year that, or per plate appearance, that's going to be really red for him because the skills are extraordinary.
I wonder about like I feel like we've seen now for this year, last year, or the year before, the young guys that are that get really like pushed up the deeper we get into these drafts. Like Corbin Carroll was the guy last year, and I feel like it's more often the young hitters than the young pitchers. I feel like people are really afraid of kind of some of these younger pitchers that they are just gonna run into their innings cap, get shut down, and whatnot. So I am a little bit surprised, like you, that Yuri just hasn't been pushed up because he fits the type of like, if you just took away the sport and the name, like the context, and you were like 20-year-old phenom did this last season and is now like in the rotation starting from day one, he'd be going a little bit higher. But you're just betting on the shape of his season being impactful when you need it the most, and hopefully not happening in June when you're just, battling week in, week out to stay near the top of your pod.
Then after him is the exact opposite, somebody who does not strike anybody out anymore, and is Shane Bieber. I've seen actually a lot of chatter lately in different places that people are drafting specifically for Underdog. They feel like he's kind of undervalued, and maybe I'm just totally done with Shane Bieber too soon. Do you think he has any? Is there meat left on the bone? He is going pretty late compared to what he has in the past.
It's actually like it feels like it was a generation ago, but go back and look at like Shane Bieber's 2020. It was a short season and everything, but he had like a 40% strikeout rate. Like he was like on top of the world as a starting pitcher. And you look at his strikeout rate since then, it's just completely plummeted. Maybe plummeted's a little too strong, but it's drastically gone down. Like he was a much different pitcher, and it coincides perfectly with a velocity decrease, which makes sense. And he also had a pretty serious shoulder injury. And I think at the time of that shoulder injury, it was, oh my God, like this is totally done. And then 2 years ago, he kind of showed like he's still, has some life in him, and he's a lot younger than I think. Like again, he feels like he's like 35 or something just because of the velo decrease. But he could hang around as a quality pitcher who doesn't have the same strikeout rate, but has great command and savvy, and he could. He's going to be a free agent pretty soon. It'll be fascinating to see what type of contract he gets. A lot of it will depend on the year he has and everything. So he does feel sturdy. Like if you are someone who might be taking Glass now and Carlos Rodon, like he feels like a good, kind of safer maybe option to pair them with.
Sure. And the next guy, Merrill Kelly, is very similar in that he's a floor guy through and through. He had a really great year last year. I am a little bit concerned just where he is on the aging curve, how much longer he stays just being effective in the ways that he pitches. So I don't know. I'm fine where he is, but I don't really get much of him. I think more exciting though is to talk about Hunter Green, who's next on the list at 118. Bat has him 18th, which is pretty crazy. He's got the red. It's got him at 27 starts, but it has him being a lot more effect. I don't know if it's the K rate. I'm seeing this right. Sorry. ATC has him higher but ranked. I don't think there's something wrong with this formula here.
Somebody fire that guy.
Fire the sheet creator. Okay. Anyway, Hunter Green, he's in a bad park. He has not stayed healthy. Brendan, are you buying in? Is there still that ceiling on Hunter Green?
Maybe I'm overcorrecting because I was very in last year. I thought he made sense as kind of what we've described Grayson, Bobby Miller as year two breakout type. That's how I viewed him last year. It was really high stuff plus. That was before I felt like I started really understanding how to utilize stuff plus in analysis. And now that you kind of like look at it again, it kind of makes sense why it didn't necessarily work out for Green, because it is mainly just two pitches. And, at a certain point, he needs to be able to avoid those blow up outings. Obviously the park doesn't help. So, yeah, it's not like, I don't think it's for me, but again, but I might just be feeling like I got burned a little bit last year. Am I looking at it? It looks like he's pretty red there for the range he's going in, right?
Yeah, he fits that.
Yeah.
Type. Like he is very much like you get what you see. I think the least likely range that he's going in next year is this one that he's currently like in. He feels like a 60th overall guy or a like 195. Hey, remember Hunter Green guy. Like I don't think this ends at Hunter Green in the same spot as next year. Like Chris Bassett, I checked this. His ADP is every day for the last 4 years been between 119 and 124. Hunter Green, there's no way. Like he's either going up or down. So I think that's we're playing best ball. So like that's a fine way to behave. You're gonna get either a lot or a little, I think, out of Hunter Green, just the way that it's the way he pitches. So good on some teams, bad on other teams, I think is a good way to think about him as well.
Yeah. I think you've said enough about Chris Bassett. Sonny Gray in St. Louis, better park. I get, a pretty good pitcher park. We've seen a history of some back issues, but for me, where he's going, I think Sonny Gray is just an awesome pitcher 3 or 4 in builds for me. I guess anybody have any Sonny Gray?
I was trying to find the exact stat, but he had one of like the lowest home run rates in the past, decade or whatever it is. Like it's not just like, oh, Sonny Gray had good homer luck last year. Like it was like, compared to the past 10 years, like really good. So that's just going to regress no matter what. Like even if he is, has taken a step forward as a pitcher because he did add a new pitch in the sweeper. That part of it's going to regress a little, but he feels super fair. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to say about him. SB 3-4 range like that. That feels right to me.
Yeah, you want a guy that's going to backfill like your risky pitching staffs. This is a good range for that kind of guy. I think like this next kind of 20-30 pick stretch is like you've done the Glasnow Rodon bullshit. Like you settle in this range and you kind of pay for your previous sins here. Yeah, Park's good. He's fine. I think it's a good combination.
And yeah, I like him over Bassett or even Verlander or Montgomery. I'll take some Barrios, but and Darvish, it's like sort of that older guy. I think I take Gray, and the ADP shows that too. We do have. Let's just group these three Houston guys together. We have Hunter Brown at 128, Justin Verlander at 132, and Kristen Javier at 142. Brendan, who's your favorite out of these three this year?
I think it's Hunter Brown, and I might have said Verlander, his situation isn't nearly as concerning as Bradish's, but when it came out like, oh, Verlander's shoulder, he's behind, like that just made me remember like he's 40, and again he's a Hall of Fame pitcher. He's defied the aging curve already, and it's not even so much like, oh, he's 40, he's gonna completely break down. It's just like when you have a little shoulder hiccup when you're 40, that's just different than having it at 28. And the strikeout rate is decreasing a little bit. I'm becoming a little less confident in Houston's pitching development as a whole. Just seems like Jeff Bagwell is really running that organization all of a sudden with his buddy, the GM, Jim Crane, the owner, Jim Crane. And it's been a little bizarre in Houston lately, but Hunter Brown, like I don't even have a case where I'm like, oh, this is why Hunter Brown is a big guy. Just, he's the youngest and has the most growth potential, it seems to me, of that crew.
Yeah, and he did get to 162 innings, and like you said earlier, we're talking about maybe that balloon got inflated a little bit too much because he did even talk about that last year. Some of we saw just him get worse over the season, and they're attributing it to fatigue for that much. So I don't know that they can like relax on him based on who else they have on the staff. So I think this similar range is what we probably see again this year, and we hope that the early success that he had, just like he can keep it a little bit longer than last year. So then Christian Javier, Chris, actually, I'll go back to Brendan because I think you were probably the highest on Christian Javier last year out of most people that I talked to. So is it a bust or is it still there?
This range is really taking a little bit of my medicine between Hunter Green and Christian Javier being two of the biggest disappointments of last season. Similar to what I said about Green, like I feel like I'm always going to be willing to chase the guy who is, going in the middle range, who has that upside to go in the top range. That's what we've talked about with Kirby, with Grayson, with Bobby Miller, with Yuri, with those skills that you're chasing. And last year, there was, I had pegged Green and Javier as candidates for that, and it didn't work out. And in hindsight, the more I've learned about why it didn't work out, it kind of makes sense. And I'm, upset with myself for missing it. And I've used those lessons to try to be better this offseason. But with Javier, I will say one thing: his velocity declined from 2022 to 2023, and that was something I didn't expect. And I don't know if maybe the word is should have expected, should not have, but he was a different pitcher. It wasn't like, oh, everything's the same, but it just turns out he's not good. It's, his skills got worse, and he showed that he does not have the ability to overcome that, whether it be with great command or a deep arsenal or anything like that. So if he doesn't have his best fastball and slider, then, he doesn't have enough to to get through big league lineups consistently.
All right. So then another young guy, the second year guy, Tanner Bybee. I'll be honest, I don't know too much. I don't have too much to say or any like in-depth knowledge of what he brings. Brendan, do you have a breakdown? I saw Chris shaking his head no either. Have you dug into Bybee at all?
This feels right that he's kind of paired with Hunter Brown as like year two pitchers who you could see taking a step forward, but they're very different bets than, again, Grayson, Bobby, Yuri, where those guys might just overwhelm you with pure stuff, fastball slider combos, all sorts of, crazy moving pitches. Whereas Bybee, it's going to be, more changeup based, more control based. I think, few years he could be what Logan Gilbert is, where we're kind of that profile of consistently taking him as a bit of an SP2. Betting against Guardians pitching development usually isn't a smart thing to do. So I think that's one thing he's got going in his favor, that it feels like they're going to maximize him the same way they've done with some other starters over the past handful of years.
Yeah, and he did get to that 157 above that 160 inning range that we like for Brown and Grayson. So definitely no concerns there. Jordan Montgomery had I think he overperformed is the best way to put it last year. He's sort of gotten by, like the underlying stuff doesn't really show to the success that he's had. You see his numbers getting into the blue here. I guess I was high on him last year when he was 160, 180 pick. I'm finding it tough to take him at 140 though this year.
What ended up being a terrible thing for him is when he was on that great post, not a terrible thing for him, but it skewed our value of him. When he was on that incredible postseason run, Jeff Passan at ESPN posted a piece about the death ball and how Jordan Montgomery throws a death ball, and he was doing so well, and it was the playoffs, and it just made this case of like, oh my God, Jordan Montgomery throws a death ball, and he's about to be a free agent, and the Rangers are killing it, and he's killing it. And I think the more that his free agency has gone on, it's forced me to take a step back and look at more of his career long numbers and just remind myself, like, wait a minute, this is Jordan Montgomery. And like, he didn't really do anything like that crazy different last year that makes me think, he's going to be the playoff version of himself. And it kind of does seem more like it was just a little bit of a hot run. This is a good range for him, along with Bassett and Sonny Gray and Jose Berrios and those kind of more boring, sturdy guys. But I do not view him as like a breakout candidate or anything.
Yeah, that death ball article is what Scott Boras prints out every morning and takes to his local Starbucks to start handing out like flyers. Like, have you seen my client? Here's his death ball. How much money do you want to give him? I don't know what to do with Montgomery either. This feels expensive for who he is, and like the uncertainty is fun, but I don't know.
These free agent guys, the longer that they go without signing, the less interested I am. Like if Blake Snell signed tomorrow, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. He could get to spring training. He's a week behind. It's not that big a deal. But if we get to like March 1st and these guys haven't signed, I'm not necessarily worried they're not going to sign, just that it's going to take them longer to build up, that, transitioning to a new city with your family, all this stuff is like it. I don't know. I just don't like it. And I have no data to prove whether or not that makes a difference or not.
Is that just a pitcher thing, or do you think that goes for
hitters? It's with all hitters. After the lockout, the season, I don't know if, like after the lockout, the free agency was so condensed, and a lot of guys who signed during that short period were on the record after the season saying that it was just way too hectic. Trevor Story, Chris Bryant were a couple of them. They have issues for other reasons, but it seems like at the time, like they were vocal about that being a thing that they experienced.
Yeah, they also blamed the changing weather patterns and the chemtrails in the sky for their long injury history. But
that's Scooter Jeanette. I'm taking Berrios, or I took a lot of him early in draft season when he was going, I think he was going a little bit later than this. I've fallen off. But if you need innings here, based on the staff you're putting together, like we've seen the downside, but we've also just seen consistency outside of like the one really bad year. But again, I think there might have been some off the field stuff too. But he's not exciting.
He's totally he's fine. He looked more comfortable last year, which was good. They trusted him more. I think down the stretch, he was going to be an important part of a playoff team. But go out on your shield, go out on top, and that's what Jose Barrios did. His best 4 1/3 innings of the season came when they were most needed. So yeah, he's fine in this range. He probably has a little more upside than some of the other guys in this zone. I got a good amount. I think what's the upside? He's going 90th overall next year. I don't know. It's a very narrow band for me. I don't think there's going to be much changing our minds about Jose Barrios one way or the other.
Yeah. You Darvish, I'm just out. Just age. I don't know. I'm just out.
He had a injury towards the end of the year that, again, it's just similar to Verlander, where you just start realizing how old this player is, and it makes you nervous that it could all fall apart at once. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a value. I think he was still, the past few years has been good on a person. He's funny. It seemed like his career was over. I forget if it was 4 or 5 years ago. He was really bad one year, and then he kind of turned it around, and he's just kind of been hanging on ever since. And he's got so many pitches that he can make it work. But yeah, it's a little bit of health concern. It's good. Yeah, he's really tough. Like Barrios, the band is tight, and Darvish, his band isn't that enormous or anything, but I go back and forth on him depending on the day.
His band is definitely tail to he's going 225 next year, not he's going 100th. I think
the price feels fine though compared to some of the other guys we've already talked about.
Yeah. Okay. So similar guy. I'm going to skip Shota for a second to talk about Chris Sale, another guy who health concerns, age concerns. For me, I don't know if I'm exaggerating because I had him on some playoff teams last year. I was big on Chris Sale last year. He was going before he had pitched in the spring, like he was going way late, and I was big on him. I kept taking him as a eventual riser. So I had him on a good playoff team, and just watching him, he's just at the point to me in his career where he is surviving on the pitches and location, and the velo is just gone. I pulled the chart for someone else the other day, and there's just this portion towards the end of the season where he has a cluster of starts where his fastball is at that dreaded below 93 range. He still had some great starts last year. He had some good strikeout starts, but I'm worried that it's not there long term. For he might come into spring throwing 95, 96 again, but for me, I'm worried that halfway through the season that he's back into that 92, 93 range, and he's just relying on his guile to get him through.
I am out. I'm a Red Sox fan, and so I feel personally burned by Chris Sale in a way where I've never even had him that much in fantasy, but just it's such a disastrous few years. And I really feel if this is kind of unfair, but if you did just hide the name and show everything that's happened the past 4 years, it makes zero sense to be overly excited about it. You're really starting to chase, 2017 through 2019. If you want people who talk themselves into the Chris Sale of old coming back.
I mean, he's in that red points per appearance range. So, Chris, are you in on Chris Sale?
I'd love to defend my like name brethren here as well. I feel like we might have gone a little bit too far with like a post trade. Like the ADP has just shot up to a point where it's it's not terrible, but it's definitely not great. Like if he was going in that like 170-ish range, then it's probably fine. But in like 150 bordering 145, like that's a little bit different animal. Like should there really be a 15 pick gap between him and Charlie Morton? I don't know. Like those two guys feel like they should be closer together. So I'm out.
Yeah. So jumping back, Shota Imanaga, I'm sure I'm not saying that exactly correct, but he is right now atop my ownership list in my dinger since we've been able to draft him. Um, Obviously, I'm not looking at the bad projections for this when I'm doing that, and even the ATC projection isn't too great. I just feel like for me there is an amount of unknown right now on him that coming into the NL Central, I think he has the chance to really smash. He could end up being a guy that we're taking at pick 200. Uh, Maybe he follows the Yusei Kikuchi sort of model, and he struggles in the first hitting the ML major leagues in the U.S. But I'm just trying to capitalize on the unknown myself.
Mhm. I can't argue against the price in this range. It feels like the right time to be taking a shot like that. So, obviously, we don't know a ton about him as far as especially results in the major league. So, with that unknown, like if he was going 20 picks higher, it'd be a different story. Especially if he was going any higher than that, and surprised me a little bit that he's not. But I like your idea here of trying to capitalize on that.
All right, Lucas Giolito, Boston, new Boston guy. Brendan, are you happy that he's in Boston?
uh, I'm really happy Craig Breslow is in Boston, and I think it might take a few years for him to get his entire pitching development operation going. But this is going to be an interesting one to see if we can turn around someone, quickly, a veteran, with major league experience and everything. Similar to Sale in the sense where it's like if you're hoping for that old Giolito to come back, I think it's just like a pipe dream. It's just been too long. He's a different pitcher now. It's just got to get that out of your mind and understand like the bet you're making. Some of his, really good looking projection there is just going to come from raw innings because he has been durable of late. And that's something that when you're adding up the season long projection, that's going to factor in a lot, just like it is with strikeouts, like we talked about with Dylan Cease. And I think with Giolito, like with taking someone like him, you're kind of banking on him being around for you all season long, and you're just gonna hope to run into some good 2-start weeks. Um, I think it's fine. I've sprinkled him in. I hate the ballpark. Should be fine for wins, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think he's fine. If someone had a big fade on him, I would totally understand why. Um, but I don't have a whole lot else to say about him.
I do think he's another guy that has sort of a negative aura around him, in that if you get in the right room, you can get a pretty decent deal on him too. And that's where I'm looking to take him. Michael King, you mentioned him earlier, Tuma. He is sort of a guy that we're worried about the innings. He's never inflated that balloon before.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got zero shot at, the 180 inning season. Like that's just not going to happen no matter what. Similar to Yuri, similar to maybe, Skubal or Reagans or one of these guys, but he's the best price of them all. So um, I would, you kind of got to think about the shape of the season, and you don't want him to be missing time right now, but if you also want to make sure you're going to have him for the playoff weeks and especially the finals and everything, but also maybe he's just someone who helps you get to the playoffs and all that sort of stuff. So there's no doubt. The only thing that I feel very strongly about is that he is good. And as long as he doesn't change as a pitcher due to a velocity decrease or his stuff decreasing, he is going to be good. It's just a matter of how many innings are you going to get, with the understanding that there is very small chance that it's a meaningful workload. Like Rodon, like you can question the innings, but he could, have that horse workload season, but that's just not going to happen for King. But he's very good per start.
Eduardo Rodriguez, he's in Arizona now. Chris, are you, another oatmeal sort of starter that I personally feel like should be going maybe a bit later, but he seems like he's finally priced. Any Eduardo Rodriguez for you, Chris?
He's totally fine. I'll have like exactly 8%. Like he'll be a guy that I get when he falls, maybe a couple times when he's at my pick, and I'm never going to take him ahead of his ADP pretty much.
All right. And then Nick Pivetta, the reliever, the starter turn reliever turn starter, but going into the second half last year, Brendan, he earned his starting position back and kind of shined.
He did. He's someone who I wrote up semi recently, and I think his ADP has risen based on where this is at right now. But he's still someone I'm comfortable mixing exposure to. It's a bad park. He was so good in the second half last year that in a way where I'm not positive is fully appreciated, and he had a new pitch. It was a sweeper that was added. I'm willing to see how far we can go with that. I know he's let people down before, but he's never had this extra pitch, and I don't know. That interests me. It feels like a upside that could hit not in a per start way, but could hit in a big season long way. And maybe my Red Sox fandom is getting in the way a little bit.
Yeah, I just don't know what to do with him. Like I don't know. Like he, in hindsight, great value last year. Maybe this is a little bit rich, but like, what if he's just cheaper Zach Eflin? Like in that mold is kind of what I see him like. He's effective, he projects really well. So I don't know what to do with him. I'm gonna kind of see where we go with Pivetta and see where the market goes on him, but no like strong take from my end.
All right. So I'm going to propose something. I don't know. We can talk offline, but we're coming up at an hour 40 minutes. We kind of have a lot of guys left here and a lot of deeper guys to talk about. So what do you guys think about making a part 2 maybe next week from here? I know sort of producing on the fly here.
No, that makes total sense. I think, some of these positions are, really meaty to go through and to talk about them with care and everything. So last thing I would want to do is rush through it.
Yeah, because I don't want to rush through like these Seattle guys, Mackenzie, or like there's a ton of names still here to talk about. And I think we have another hour at least on names.
Well, we need like another hour just Brandon Fott, but other than that, we could do the rest of these guys probably in a couple of minutes. But yeah, Fott. We'll talk about Fott a lot. I have a lot of Fott thoughts, a lot of Fott puns. So yeah.
All right, so we're gonna cut off part 1 here with Nick Pivetta. So thank you guys for watching. So for Brendan and Chris, have good drafts.